I'm Brian McCreath at GBH in Boston with composer Liliya Ugay, part of El Puerto Rico. Liliya, thank you for taking a little bit of time from your home today to be with me here in the studio.
Thank you, Brian. I'm happy to be here.
So, Island of Enchantment is the piece that you wrote as part of El Puerto Rico with the Victory Players. And I guess I want to walk back to the very beginning of your involvement with this project and ask about the concept of writing a piece inspired by Puerto Rico. Your own background is from Uzbekistan originally and now in the United States. And I wonder what attracted you to send a proposal to write a piece of music that would have anything to do with Puerto Rico. Is Puerto Rico a place that you visited before or that you knew anything about?
Yes, it's really interesting, right? It's in fact, I've never been to Puerto Rico. I don't have Puerto Rican roots. And I just was very intrigued by this place. So I was researching a lot and reading a lot. And when I saw the proposal, when I saw the invitation for this proposal, I thought like I would like to try something like that because I'd like to explore this idea of imaginative place and imaginative in the way that it also has the different beautiful phenomena both historically and in terms of the nature. So I decided to try and I applied for this project, and I was happy to be here to accept it.
Sure, sure. And was that research and looking into Puerto Rico something that had already been in process, or was it sort of inspired by the proposal in the first place?
In some ways, it was inspired by the proposal. You know, I knew few things about Puerto Rico before, but I coming actually from quite opposite place of the world, and in fact, Uzbekistan being a double-locked country, the country that doesn't have access to the water, like direct access to the water, you have to cross the border of another country to get access to the sea or ocean. I was always been fascinated with places like Puerto Rico that are islands. So I, like this sort of imagination of being on the island or being in a place where you've never been before. And so that's how the piece came, the idea of for the piece came, the Island of Enchantment.
Yeah, yeah. You say in your notes that that originally, when the proposal was accepted and you started making plans, that you had ambitions to actually go to Puerto Rico.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I did.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, but then the pandemic ruined it. So in some ways, and then it kind of remained being this imaginative island. I did go recently to Destin, Florida, which is not quite the same thing. But I was like, as I was finishing the piece, I was there and was trying to sort of reimagine if I were in that place. But I think for me, what attracts me is not the fact that it's being realized or not, but that the entire place is imagination for me. So it's kind of my fairy tale on Puerto Rico as a place. There are some things that I personally find that connect me to the Puerto Rican people, is that throughout my whole life, I've been a minority in my country. In Uzbekistan, I'm half Russian, half Tatar, half Korean, half Tatar. And always felt like I've been minority there, and coming to the United States, yes, it's a country of the immigrants, but still there is a sense of kind of being in minority, in sort of sense of longing for home, sense of nostalgia in some ways. And that is another, I think, emotional content of the piece that I was exploring here. And so the island's kind of nostalgia of like trying to be there, the place that you would like to be at. Yeah.
Well, and so that's fascinating that you find this connection sort of in the condition, the way of life of Puerto Rican experience in the world and your own experience in a sort of philosophical way, maybe. But were you tempted at all to look into Puerto Rican folk music or any elements that way to draw into your music for this particular piece?
Yes, I definitely did.
Yeah.
And I was, watching various videos and listening to Puerto Rican music. I found particular interest in like Puerto Rican rhythms. And in fact, the third movement of this piece is entirely based on two Puerto Rican rhythms.
Okay.
that I was finding online, and was thinking like, why wouldn't I base my sort of harmonic language with this very straightforward rhythms?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
And so as you say, you're from a landlocked country, and the idea of being in a place where the ocean is kind of all around also led you to some really beautifully expressive sounds that you draw from this small ensemble. And I wonder if you can describe how you came to those sounds. I'm thinking especially of the sounds of seagulls, and these evocative textures that you've built into the piece. Was there a lot of experimentation involved on your part, or did you draw on techniques that you had used in other works that you had written before?
you know, victory players, the ensemble that will be performing this work, actually, what is so great about this project, they allowed us to try the excerpts of the piece before actually we wrote the final version.
Oh, okay.
So 2 years ago, was 2019, I actually went to Holyoke, and we were in residence, and we just tried little excerpts. We were trying different sort of sound worlds live with the ensemble. And that was, I think, extremely helpful, and that's what I really felt like I benefited from doing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
From the other side, obviously, I'm just, as a person from the landlocked country, always felt extremely fascinating by the sounds of the ocean and the water. Someone from Florida probably takes it as a given. So for me, I came to America 10 years ago. So to come to the ocean for the first time was just a miraculous experience. And so I wanted to play on those sounds, and thus there are three movements. And first one is it's titled To the Port, and the second one to the sea, and the third one is to the sun. So the first one literally explores the sounds of the port. So basically from this kind of the steamboat, the seagulls, and various ocean nature, like tides, sounds. And then the second movement is a stillness, so it's more like the night, or like the phenomenon in the Puerto Rico, this night mosquitoes. They called what the dragon flagellates. Maybe I forgot the exact name. So the spark and night. So this is the particular movement that is inspired by that imagery. And then the last movement is where the rhythm, the Puerto Rican comes into the music, and I set my melody into it. So it's like a song with sort of the call for like dance and more like active human participation.
Sure, sure, and it comes together so beautifully. I mean, it's a really rich experience to listen through all three of these movements. I'm struck by what you said about your visit in 2019. Not only the fact that you were able to experiment with the musicians themselves, the actual musicians who would be playing the piece of music. I wonder, first of all, how rare that is for a composer to have not just your own experiments on the piano that you then imagine in an orchestrated form, but you have the musicians who are literally going to be playing the piece of music right there in front of you to help you. What was that like? Is that as rare as I might be thinking that it is?
Yes, it is quite rare. I mean, in fact, some groups are trying to practice more and this kind of approach more and more nowadays, but it's still to the point that you actually just can come to the place and work with musicians directly, and you're not expected to finish the piece right there. You just want to give some excerpts and some parts to try. So it's not like, it's not that sort of one single line process where you start the piece and finish the piece. You just try things. Yeah. And as much as I talked to other composers, what I heard is that many times, or the previous sort of group, what they tried the first year, they end up not using next year, or they end up using certain parts of the sounds that they tried and not others. So it gives this opportunity to make mistakes, to try and fail, which is so important for learning and for experimenting and for kind of pushing your own musical language ahead of what you feel like your comfort zone is.
Sure, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there's also the I'm sort of imagining, and I wonder if you can comment on this, the luxury of coming to Holyoke to be not just with the musicians, but with some other composers, and within one of the largest per capita Puerto Rican communities in the U.S. And I wonder how much that may have, added to or transformed the ideas that you brought with you from Florida in 2019, and what that added to the piece that you eventually ended up writing.
Yes, it definitely was extremely important. Most of the other composers, you probably interviewed them already, they have at least, either some kind of connection to Puerto Rico, or they like more of the Spanish origins. So definitely hearing their music and their take on this theme
Sure.
was impacted me a lot. But also we stayed in the hotel Jay's bed and breakfast place, and Jay being of the Puerto Rican descent himself. So nice, so much of hospitality, so kind. It was reflected in like sometimes even in the breakfast food. So all of this sort of being in the environment there definitely had some impact, either musically or in terms of like emotional, or in terms of kind of more spiritual attitude to the piece that I was writing. Yeah. So I would say the third movement was completely something that came out of there, of my experience being in Holyoke, because initially I was planning a little bit different structure of the piece and a little bit different kind of approach to it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if someone were to look into more music by Liliya Ugay, would they find other pieces that might be similar to this, or was this more of a departure for you from the way that your normal language, your normal kinds of expressions? Where does this fit in with your overall catalog of work?
It is a little bit of departure, I would say, probably because of the topic. But in some ways, my music reflects my life. My life is my identity, being an immigrant, having this multicultural origin, ethnically. So in some ways, yes, it is definitely my music, and like harmonically, it's my language. In terms of timbre, there's a lot of departure because I was using such a like direct images in my head, and the sounds of the word and the sea, and also I had such a good chance to experiment with the sounds beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it's both. It is within my sort of musical zone, but at the same time it departs a little bit in terms of this experimental sound quality of it.
Yeah, yeah, and this particular formation of chamber ensemble, what they call a Pierrot ensemble, mm-hmm. Is this a combination of instruments that you've written for before, that you'd had some experience with, or was this a sort of a new set of textures and colors to work with for you?
In fact, I've never written for Pierrot ensemble before.
Okay.
I've written for different types of similar ensembles, like larger, like 9, 8 kind of single instruments.
Sure.
And ensembles, but never for this particular sextet. Uh-huh. So I was also attracted by this idea initially because I was thinking I need to have Pierrot sextet. It's like one of the standard instrumentations that composers, I think every composer should have.
Right, yeah. Well, and as I said before, I mean, the range of colors and textures that you pull out of this very, very compact ensemble is really striking. So Island of Enchantment really has it. I mean, it's not a long piece because none of the pieces in El Puerto Rico are really particularly long, but there's so much variety in it. There's such a turning from one movement through the next of all kinds of varieties. So I really appreciate it. I wonder if it had the effect of opening a new sort of idea to you or new direction in your music that you've now taken forward in your next projects.
Definitely so. Like after this work, I definitely feel very comfortable, first of all, on taking basically any subject that I feel like I could find the connection to because at first I was just a little bit not worried, but I was like, oh, well, will I actually be able to make it sort of my own, but at the same time, kind of directed towards Puerto Rico, which I think I was able to. But it also, it raises the confidence in using this particular timbre combinations that I was using here.
Yeah.
So it definitely makes me learn skills.
Yeah, sure.
Of orchestration in some ways.
Yeah. Well, I also appreciate, along with those textures within the piece, just the place that this piece holds within the project as it is right now. Because as you say, most of the other composers involved have a more direct connection to Puerto Rico, either having been born there or ancestry there. And I really appreciate your own connection to that history in a very indirect way. And I think that also has a true validity of perspective about Puerto Rico coming from someone who's not from there and who actually is taking in that experience and translating it through your own experience. So thank you for that. And thank you for being with us for today. It's great to see you. I'm sorry that you couldn't be here, but all the reasons are very understandable. And I know, as I said earlier, that the experience of being a parent is just as important as everything else you're doing. So
right.
so thanks for making the time to talk this way with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.